This story is titled, Parents Favored My Sister and Treated Me Like Their Servant. Now, after they watched as another man calls me his son and gave me his company, they want me back. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Throwaway because some people know my main. And this story is, well, you'll see. I've been wanting to share this for a while, but needed time to process everything that's happened. So, background about me, 27 male. I grew up in what looked like your typical upper middle class family in suburban Connecticut. You know the type. Perfectly manicured lawn, Range Rover in the driveway, one of those pretentious live, laugh, love signs in the kitchen that my mom probably spent way too much on at Pottery Barn. The kind of house where everything looked perfect from the outside, but was basically a prison on the inside. My dad, 54 male, is this big shot financial advisor who never shuts up about his client portfolio or his golf handicap. The type of guy who wears Rolex watches but complains about the price of milk, if you know what I mean. He's got this thing where he needs everyone to know how successful he is. Like, we get it, Dad. You make six figures, but maybe try making actual connections with your kids? And then there's my mom, 52 female. Holy shit, where do I even start? She's like a character straight out of Real Housewives, but not even one of the fun ones. Her entire personality revolves around what the country club ladies think of her. She's on every committee, volunteers at every charity event, but only the ones with photo ops, and has probably had more work done than she'd ever admit. Her Instagram is just chef's kiss levels of cringe. Then there's my sister Emma, 24 female. God's gift to the world if you ask my parents. Emma could literally set the house on fire, and they'd probably blame the house for being too flammable. She was their do-over baby, their perfect little princess who could do no wrong. Straight B student? She's focusing on her social development. Me getting straight A's? You should be doing extra credit. And then there's me, Thomas, or Tommy, or hey you. Depends on whether my parents needed something from me or were trying to look good in front of company. I was the accident they never planned for. They've literally said this to my face at a family dinner. BTW, real nice thing to tell your kid over pot roast. Fun fact, they named me Thomas because it was my mom's dad's name, and they thought maybe that would score them extra points in his will. Spoiler alert, it didn't work, and they're still bitter about it LMAO. Our house was this massive 5-bedroom McMansion in one of those neighborhoods where everyone's trying to outdo each other with their Christmas decorations. We had a home theater that nobody used, a formal dining room that only saw action when Mom hosted her book club. Spoiler, they never actually discussed the books. And one of those huge gourmet kitchens where the only thing that ever got cooked was my mom's microwaved lean cuisine. My room? It was technically the smallest bedroom, right next to the laundry room, because it's convenient since you do all the laundry anyway. Emma got the huge bedroom with the ensuite bathroom and the window seat, because obviously she needed the space for her creative development or whatever BS excuse they came up with. The really messed up part? They weren't even trying to hide their favoritism. Like, at all. They had this huge wall of family photos going up the main staircase. Want to guess how many had me in them? 3. And in one of them, I'm literally just in the background of Emma's dance recital photo. Meanwhile, Emma had professional photo shoots done every year. Spring photos, fall photos, Christmas cards, you name it. I remember this one time when I was maybe 12. I found this old photo album in the attic while I was cleaning. Because of course I was cleaning the attic on a Saturday, while Emma was at her horse riding lessons. It was from before Emma was born, and there were actually a few baby photos of me. When I asked my mom about it, she just said, "Oh, we were still figuring out the whole parenting thing then," and took the album away. Never saw it again. The worst part wasn't even the obvious favoritism. It was the gaslighting. They'd do this thing where they'd rewrite history in real time. Like they'd promise something, get my hopes up, then completely deny ever making that promise. Or they'd do something cruel, and then tell everyone I was too sensitive, or imagining things when I got upset about it. I started keeping a journal when I was 14, hidden under a loose floorboard in my closet, because privacy wasn't a thing in our house, just to make sure I wasn't actually going crazy. Looking back at it now, it reads like a manual on emotional abuse. But when you're living it, you start to believe maybe you are the problem. You know what's really fucked up? They actually had money. Like, a lot of it. This wasn't a case of them struggling to make ends meet or having to make tough choices. They just chose to invest everything. Time, money, attention, love, into Emma, and treat me like their personal unpaid servant. But here's the thing about being treated like you don't matter. You learn to be invisible. And when you're invisible, you can plan your escape without anyone noticing. And boy, did I have plans. Being the family ghost actually turned me into a pretty decent hacker. Not the illegal kind, just creative problem solving. When you're not allowed to have your own computer, you figure out ways around it. The public library became my second home. Shout out to Mrs. Peterson, the librarian who always forgot to enforce the 1 hour computer time limit when I was teaching myself Python. My parents' attitude about technology was wild. Emma got a MacBook Pro for her 13th birthday because she needed it for her lifestyle blogging, which lasted exactly 2 weeks BTW. Meanwhile, I was building a secret computer Frankenstein style from parts I salvaged from the school's recycling program. Had to hide it in the crawl space above my closet and only use it when everyone was asleep. Got so good at typing silently that my college roommate later thought I was some kind of keyboard ninja, LOL. The contrast between how they treated us was like a masterclass in favoritism. When Emma wanted to do ballet, they spent $3,000 on private lessons, another $500 on the perfect shoes, and drove her 2 hours each way to the best studio in the state. When I qualified for the state robotics competition, they told me we couldn't afford the $50 registration fee. I ended up mowing lawns in secret to pay for it myself. Every summer was the same story. Emma would go off to these fancy camps, horseback riding in Vermont, art programs in France, you name it. Meanwhile, I was basically running a one-man cleaning service at home. Cooking, cleaning, gardening, maintenance. You'd think I was training to be a butler or something. My dad's idea of father-son bonding was teaching me how to properly wax his precious BMW. The psychological warfare was next level, though. They had this way of making everything seem like it was for my own good. Like this one time in junior year, I'd been secretly working at a computer repair shop, told them I was at the library studying, and saved up almost $2,000. Made the mistake of telling them about it because I thought maybe they'd finally be proud of me for being responsible with money. Instead, my dad gave me this whole speech about how he could invest it and double it for me. Used all his financial advisor smooth talk, made it sound like he was doing me this huge favor. Even threw in some BS about how this could be our chance to bond over business. I was 16 and stupid and actually believed him. Handed over every penny. Want to guess what happened? 6 months later, when I asked about the investment, he looked me dead in the face and said, "What money? You never gave me any money." Then hit me with the, "Are you sure you're feeling okay? Maybe you should see someone about these delusions." My mom backed him up completely. Made me question my own sanity until I found the receipt I'd made him sign. Yeah, even at 16, I didn't fully trust them. Hidden in my journal. But you know what's really messed up? The money wasn't even the worst part. It was the way they'd get inside your head. They had this talent for making you feel guilty about everything. Like this one time, I got a perfect score on my SATs. Instead of being proud, my mom just sighed and said, "I hope you're not letting these test scores go to your head. You know, Emma's really struggling with her PSATs, and it would be nice if you could help her instead of always showing off." Speaking of Emma, look, I don't completely blame her for how she turned out. She was as much a victim of their BS as I was, just in a different way. They parentified me while infantilizing her. By 17, I could manage a household budget, cook full meals, and handle minor home repairs. Emma? She didn't even know how to do laundry. They basically trained her to be helpless while making me her backup parent. The college application process was when everything really came to a head. I'd been planning my escape for years at this point. Had a whole separate email account they didn't know about. Used the library's address for mail. The whole 9 yards. Applied to every scholarship I could find. My guidance counselor, another real MVP, helped me submit everything without needing their signatures. Then I got the acceptance letter from MIT. Full ride, my ticket out. The day it came, to the library obviously, I almost cried. Mrs. Peterson actually did cry. But I knew I couldn't tell my parents right away. They'd find some way to screw it up. So I played it cool, kept acting like their obedient little servant while secretly preparing for the biggest escape of my life. Had everything planned down to the minute. Got a separate bank account at a different bank. Took me months to gather all the documents I needed. Slowly moved all my important stuff to a storage unit I rented with my repair shop money. Even got a burner phone. Yeah, I watched too many spy movies, but hey, it worked. The day after graduation, while they were busy planning Emma's graduation party, she was finishing middle school, which apparently deserved a bigger celebration than my high school graduation, I vanished. Left them a note saying I got into college, didn't say where, and not to bother looking for me. Only took what I could fit in my backpack. Left everything else. All the designer clothes they'd bought to keep up appearances, the fancy watch they gave me for my 16th birthday, that they reminded me about every time I misbehaved, all of it. Only kept my Frankenstein computer and my journal. So there I was, 18 years old, standing in front of MIT's campus with nothing but a backpack full of clothes and my Frankenstein laptop. Scared shitless, but also feeling this wild sense of freedom. You know that scene in Shawshank Redemption where Andy escapes and stands in the rain with his arms up? Kind of felt like that, minus the sewage tunnel part, lol. First few weeks were rough, not gonna lie. Had to figure out everything on my own. Setting up a bank account properly. The temporary one I'd made before leaving wasn't enough for work-study payments. Getting a cell phone plan. Turns out my spy movie burner phone wasn't great for daily use. Learning how to exist as an actual person with rights and stuff. But compared to living with my parents, still felt like a vacation. Financial aid covered tuition and basic housing. But Boston is expensive AF. Had to get creative with making money. Started working at the campus IT help desk in the mornings. 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. shifts because nobody else wanted them. Then I'd go to classes, grab lunch if I could afford it that day. Spoiler, often couldn't. More classes, and then evening shifts doing food delivery on my bike because I couldn't afford a car. Weekends were for freelance coding. Remember all those nights secretly teaching myself programming? Started paying off big time. Found this sweet spot doing WordPress customization for small businesses. Nothing fancy, but it paid decent money and I could do it from anywhere. My roommate thought I was insane because I'd code until like 3 a.m. But hey, sleep is for people who didn't spend their childhood as indentured servants, right? The funny thing about being poor in college, you get really good at finding free food. Pro tip, rich kids club meetings. Always have catering, and nobody ever checks if you're actually a member. The Business Student Association's weekly meetings got me through most of sophomore year. Plus, their networking events actually came in handy later, but we'll get to that. Junior year was when things started turning around. My freelance work was picking up, and I'd managed to save enough to not have to choose between eating and doing laundry anymore. Then came the email that changed everything. This growing tech company in Boston was looking for summer interns. The pay was actually decent, and the project sounded cool. Applied on a whim, didn't expect much. Got called in for an interview at this modern office building downtown. Walking in felt surreal, like those tech company offices you see in movies. Glass walls, cool furniture, free snacks everywhere. Definitely grabbed some for later, old habits die hard. The interview itself was intense. 6 hours of coding challenges and technical questions. But for the first time in my life, all those hours of secret learning paid off. I actually knew my stuff. That's when I first met James, 58 male. He was doing the final interview, which wasn't even really an interview. He just looked at my code from the challenges, asked me to explain my thinking, and then started brainstorming improvements with me. Not in a condescending way like my dad would have done, but like, actually interested in my ideas. I remember being confused because he didn't act like a CEO. No fancy suit, no power moves. Just this guy in jeans and a company t-shirt who really loved talking about code. Found out later he still coded regularly. Said it kept him connected to what the company was really about. The internship was supposed to start after finals, but I got another email a week later. There was this major bug in their main product that needed fixing ASAP. They wanted to know if I could start early, part-time. The pay was more than I made from all my other jobs combined. Obviously, I said yes. That's how I ended up in the office at 2 a.m. 3 weeks later, surrounded by energy drinks and debugging logs, trying to track down this really nasty memory leak. I thought I was alone until I heard someone by the coffee machine. It was James. Instead of asking what some random intern was doing there after hours, he grabbed 2 cups of coffee, pulled up a chair, and said, "Talk me through what you're seeing." We spent the next 4 hours pair programming, just fixing bugs and talking code. He never made me feel stupid for not knowing something, never pulled the "I'm the CEO" card, just 2 developers trying to solve a problem. By sunrise, we'd not only fixed the original bug, but found and fixed 3 other potential issues. As we were wrapping up, he looked at my Frankenstein laptop, which I was kind of embarrassed about, but it was all I had, and asked about its specs. I explained how I'd built it from recycled parts. Instead of laughing, he got this look in his eyes, kind of like pride. Then he told me his first computer was also built from scraps, back when he was starting the company in his garage. Before I left that morning, he said something that stuck with me. You know what I see when I look at that laptop? Someone who doesn't let limited resources limit their potential. Then he casually mentioned that interns get a company laptop and I should talk to IT about getting mine. That summer changed everything. For the first time in my life, I was somewhere I actually belonged. No mind games, no manipulation, just pure meritocracy. If you did good work, you got recognized. If you had ideas, people listened. What a concept, right? James kept dropping by my desk randomly, always with technical questions or ideas he wanted to bounce around. At first, I thought he was checking up on me, making sure the weird intern wasn't breaking anything. Took me way too long to realize he was actually mentoring me. So that bug we fixed during my internship, turns out it saved the company millions in potential lost revenue. James didn't just offer me a full-time position. He created a whole new role specifically for me, security architecture engineer. Basically meant I got to build cool stuff and break things, legally this time. The company was growing like crazy. We were this mid-sized tech firm when I started, maybe 200 employees. But James had this vision for expansion that was honestly kind of insane. He wanted to revolutionize how companies handle data security, the kind of stuff that makes tech bros at parties start drooling. My first project as a full-time employee? Building a completely new security framework for our main product. James basically threw me in the deep end, gave me a team of senior engineers, all older than me BTW, super awkward at first, a budget that made my eyes water, and full creative control. I thought he was crazy. Looking back now, he was testing me. Remember how I mentioned being invisible in my parents' house? Those observation skills came in handy. I noticed things others missed, like how our biggest competitor had this tiny vulnerability in their API. Found it during a completely legal security audit before anyone asks. Wrote up a detailed analysis and solution, sent it to James at like 1 a.m. because my sleep schedule was still garbage. He called me into his office first thing next morning. Thought I was in trouble or something. Thanks for the trauma, parents. Instead, he asked me to present my findings to the board. Me, a 22-year-old baby dev, presenting to a room full of serious business people in suits. Talk about terrifying. But here's where James did something my parents never did. He believed in me. Night before the presentation, he stayed late helping me prepare. Ordered pizza, walked through my slides, gave advice. Not in a controlling way like my dad would have. Do it exactly like this or you'll embarrass me. But more like guiding. He'd ask questions that made me think deeper, challenge my own assumptions. The presentation? Nailed it. Board approved a complete security overhaul based on my recommendations. Budget? 50 million. Team size? 100 plus engineers. My anxiety? Through the roof. But James just looked at me with this proud smile and said, "I knew you could do it, son." He didn't even realize he'd said it. Just slipped out naturally. But I noticed, hard not to when you've spent your whole life wanting to hear that word said with actual pride behind it. The next few years were intense. The security overhaul was just the beginning. James kept giving me more responsibility. First technical leadership roles, then actual management positions. By 24, I was heading our entire security division. Had my own office, company car, the whole deal. But the real growth wasn't in the titles or perks. It was in the small moments. Like when James would stop by my office late at night. Yeah, my workaholic habits hadn't changed. Just to chat about life. He'd share stories about building the company, mistakes he'd made, lessons learned. Started inviting me to his house for dinner. Introduced me to his friends as my boy Thomas. NGL. Teared up first time he did that. Found out he'd never married, never had kids. Said he was too focused on building the company. But the way he looked after his employees? Man was more of a father to half the office than my actual dad ever was to me. Then came the executive meetings. James started bringing me along. Said I needed to learn the business side. At first, I just sat there taking notes, trying not to feel like an imposter. But he'd always ask my opinion, actually listen to my ideas. Started giving me more strategic projects, teaching me about the parts of running a company they don't cover in CS degrees. By 25, I was the youngest VP in company history, had a team of over 500 people, equity in the company, and an office with a view of the Boston skyline. The kind of success my dad always bragged about wanting for me, but actively prevented me from achieving. The company's value hit $10 billion that year. We were in talks for international expansion, major partnerships, acquisition offers, that James kept turning down. I was working insane hours, but loving every minute. For the first time in my life, I was somewhere I could actually grow. James and I fell into this routine. Weekly dinner meetings that turned into just dinners. He'd tell me about his day, ask about mine, give advice about everything from code architecture to relationship troubles. Started feeling less like mentorship and more like family? The healthy kind, not the toxic mess I grew up with. Then one day, about 6 months ago, his assistant scheduled an urgent meeting. Private, no agenda. Those were never good signs in corporate life. Thought maybe I'd screwed something up. Or worse, maybe he was sick? Thanks, anxiety. You're the gift that keeps on giving. So picture this. It's a regular Tuesday morning. I'm in my office reviewing security protocols for our European expansion when James's assistant Sarah messages me. James needs to see you. 2 p.m. private meeting. Now, Sarah's been with the company forever, and she never schedules last-minute meetings without an agenda. My anxiety brain immediately went into overdrive. Spent the next 3 hours going through every possible scenario. Was I getting fired? Was James sick? Was the company being sold? Did they finally figure out I was just a kid playing pretend in a fancy suit? Hello, imposter syndrome, my old friend. By lunch, I'd convinced myself I was about to lose everything I'd built. 2 p.m. rolls around, and I'm standing outside James's office like a kid sent to the principal's office. His assistant gives me this weird little smile. Looking back now, she totally knew what was coming, and waves me in. James is sitting there, not at his desk, but in the casual seating area where we usually have our brainstorming sessions. There's coffee, the good kind, not the office kitchen stuff, and those fancy cookies he knows I like. First red flag, James looks nervous. In 5 years, I'd never seen him nervous. Not during major product launches, not during board meetings, not even when we had that massive server crash in 23. But there he was, fidgeting with his coffee cup like a rookie dev at their first code review. Sit down, Thomas, he says, and I'm mentally preparing my resignation letter. Then he drops the bomb. I'm retiring. My brain just stopped. Blue screen of death. Full system crash. James? Retiring? The man literally coded for fun on weekends. The guy who pulled all-nighters with junior devs just because he loved solving problems. That James was retiring? But before I could even process that, he hits me with the real knockout punch. And I want you to take over as CEO. I literally laughed. Like full-on nervous laughter. Thought it was a joke. Me? CEO? I was 26. We were $1 billion company. There were executives twice my age who'd been there longer than I'd been alive. James just sat there, calm as ever, and said the words that changed my life. I've been grooming you for this since that night we fixed the memory leak. You think it was a coincidence I kept giving you bigger projects? More responsibility? Bringing you to board meetings? Son, you've basically been running half the company already. That word again. Son. But this time it wasn't casual. This time, he meant it. He pulled out this folder. Turned out he'd been planning this for over a year. Had documentation of every major decision I'd made, every project I'd led, every innovation I'd brought to the company. He'd been quietly building a case to present to the board about why I should be his successor. But why me? I asked, still kind of in shock. His answer? Because you built yourself from nothing. Because you see solutions where others see problems. Because you care about the people, not just the profit. Because you remind me of myself at your age, but better. Then he told me something I didn't know. Turns out he'd had offers to sell the company. Big offers. Like billions with a B offers. But he'd turned them all down because he was waiting for the right successor. This company is my legacy, he said. I never had kids of my own, but I've watched you grow from that intern with the Frankenstein laptop into someone I'd be proud to call my son. I definitely cried. Like, ugly cried. No shame admitting it. 27 years of wanting to hear someone say they were proud of me, and here was this man who'd done more for me in 5 years than my biological father had done in my entire life. The next hour was a crash course in what would happen next. Board meetings, PR strategies, transition plans. James had thought of everything. He'd even prepared responses to the inevitable age-based criticism. Youth isn't a liability, he said. It's an asset. You understand where technology is going because you're part of the generation that's building it. But the best part? He wasn't just dumping this on me and walking away. He had a whole transition plan. Would stay on as executive chairman for the first year, be there to guide me through the change. Think of it as father-son bonding time, he said with that grin of his. As I was leaving his office, still in a daze, he stopped me. Thomas, wait. Handed me this small box. Inside was a key card, but not a normal office one. It was to his personal lab in the basement, the one where he did all his experimental coding. The holy grail of our company that even senior engineers only whispered about. I figure my son should have access to his inheritance, he said. Just casual as anything, like he hadn't just officially adopted me in every way that mattered. Walking back to my office, I caught my reflection in the glass walls. Still looked like the same person, but everything had changed. I had a new title, a new responsibility, and most importantly, A real father. Of course, the universe has a sick sense of humor. Guess who suddenly remembered they had a son when the press release went out? The press release about my CEO appointment went out on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was blowing up, like literally smoking with notifications. LinkedIn messages, emails, texts from numbers I didn't recognize. The usual stuff you'd expect when someone my age gets named CEO of a very big company. But then came the message I'd been dreading. Tommy, sweetie, we're so proud of you. Call us ASAP. Love, Mom and Dad. First of all, they'd never called me sweetie in my life. Second, they hadn't contacted me in years. And suddenly they're proud? Sure, January. But the real kicker? They sent this message through Emma's Instagram because I had them blocked everywhere else. Girl hadn't spoken to me since I missed her precious wedding, but now she was playing Messenger? I ignored it, obviously. But oh boy, they were just getting started. Within 24 hours, every single relative I had suddenly remembered I existed. Got messages from aunts I hadn't seen since I was 12, cousins who'd sided with my parents years ago, even my mom's college roommate. Like what? All of them saying the same thing. Family is everything, and you should give them another chance. And my personal favorite, they've changed. Then came the emails. My dad, the financial genius, sent me this long message about how he'd been following my career, stalking much, and how proud he was that I'd followed in his footsteps in the business world. Followed in his footsteps? My guy was out here managing other people's trust funds while I was building a tech empire. But okay. The best part? He included a business proposal. Actually had the audacity to pitch me investment opportunities. Said he could help manage my newfound wealth because families should stick together in financial matters. Translation? He found out I was worth more than him and wanted a piece of the pie. My mom's approach was more emotional manipulation. Shocking, I know. She sent this tearjerker about how she'd always believed in me, lies, and how she'd been protecting me by pushing me so hard, more lies. Said she couldn't sleep at night knowing her baby boy was out there without his mother's guidance. I literally snorted coffee through my nose reading that one. But the real circus started when they showed up at our company's holiday party. Still don't know how they got in. Pretty sure they schmooze-talk their way past security by dropping my name. One minute, I'm chatting with our engineering team about the new AI project. Next minute, I hear my mom's voice cutting through the crowd. Tommy! There's our successful boy! The whole room went quiet. Like horror movie quiet. My dad's there in what I'm pretty sure was a new suit. My mom's had what looked like fresh Botox. And they're both wearing these huge fake smiles that gave me instant flashbacks to every forced family photo ever. They started this whole performance about being my proud parents. My dad was telling anyone who'd listen about how he always encouraged my interest in computers. This man literally sold my PC for spending too much time on it. My mom was going around introducing herself as Thomas's mother, yes, the Thomas. We're so blessed. The worst part? They were taking credit for everything. We always knew he was special. And we invested so much in his education. Spoiler, they didn't spend a dime. And my personal favorite, all those hours he spent in his room working on computers. We encouraged that. Yeah, because you made me fix your devices for free instead of hiring actual tech support. I was frozen, like full system crash frozen. All those years of therapy, all that progress, and these two people could still reduce me to that scared kid with just their presence. But then, James stepped in. Y'all, the way this man handled it was masterclass. He walked over, put his hand on my shoulder, grounding me instantly. He knows about my anxiety, and just took control. Didn't raise his voice, didn't make a scene, just looked at them and said, I think it's time for you to leave. My dad tried to pull the "we're his parents" card. Bad move. James just smiled, not a nice smile, mind you, and said, no, you're trespassers at a private event. Security will show you out. As they were being escorted out, my mom started screaming about how James had stolen me, how they were my real family. It was like a scene from a bad movie. The best part? Most of my employees didn't even know who they were. One junior dev asked if they were those crazy people from QAnon trying to crash tech events. After they left, James just turned to me and said, son, let's get back to celebrating your achievements. Emphasize the your while staring at the door they'd just been dragged through. Power move. But they weren't done. Oh no. The next day, they launched their social media campaign. My mom started posting these long, dramatic stories about parent alienation and how some man had brainwashed her son. Started sharing baby pictures I didn't even know existed. Way to prove you had them all along but kept them from me. Writing these novels about how much they'd sacrificed for me. Then came the financial attacks. My dad started reaching out to our investors, actually tried to convince them I was mentally unstable and under undue influence, sent emails to our board about his concerns for the company's future under my leadership. Real professional, Dad. But here's the thing about karma. It's got a wicked sense of timing. Remember those investment opportunities he was trying to pitch? Turns out he'd lost a bunch of money in some sketchy schemes. Their perfect little life was falling apart, and they saw me as their meal ticket. How do I know this? Because Emma, of all people, finally broke down and told me the truth. Sent me this long message about how they'd been struggling since some bad investments, had to downsize, lost their country club membership. Oh, the humanity. She actually apologized for her part in everything, said she finally understood what I'd been dealing with now that they were turning their manipulation on her. But the best part? The absolute cherry on top? James had his legal team document everything. Every crazy email, every attempted contact, every social media rant. Built this beautiful restraining order case without even telling me, just in case we needed it. So I sent them a final message warning them to never contact me again, or I would file a lawsuit against them for defamation. That shut them up quickly, and I never heard from them again. Your really family is the one how stands beside always no matter what. Thanks, Reddit, for reading my story.